Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we slip into the smoke-swirled streets of Edo, now Tokyo, as the sun drops low behind tiled rooftops and the wind carries the scent of burnt pine and miso soup. You're wandering through narrow alleys, where paper lanterns sway gently, throwing golden halos against the damp cobblestones. The chatter from nearby tea houses floats through sliding doors, but your attention is drawn elsewhere. What has become of her? Windows are drawn everywhere, where a low, rhythmic hyo-shiji, the click-clack of wooden clappers, cuts through the night like a warning bell with no words. It's not ominous, not yet. It's just part of the rhythm here. You squint up toward a watchtower, silhouetted against the dusk. A shadow moves. Someone's on patrol. Part lookout, part alarm system, part local legend. Legend, you're standing in a city made of wood, packed tighter than a box of matches, where even a single lantern tipping over can lead to a catastrophe you probably won't survive. Edo was gorgeous and flammable. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wrap your hori closer against the rising chill and follow the faint glow of movement around the next corner. A group of men is clustered under a flickering lantern outside what looks like a bathhouse. But they're not patrons. They're built like scaffolding, broad-shouldered, tattooed, and talking loud enough to rattle windows. You've just stumbled upon your first Haikeshi, Edo's firefighters. Except they don't look like your idea of firefighters at all. One of them, shirt open, revealing a tattooed river god curled around his ribs, spots you gawking. He doesn't scowl, he grins, teeth stained with miso and pride. "First fire you seen?" he asks. You nod dumbly. He tosses a soaked towel over his shoulder and walks off toward the district's fire tower, still laughing. "Hey, what's up?" he calls, and two of the firemen run to him. The Haikeshi were more than civil servants. In the labyrinth of Edo, they were part warrior, part fashion icon, part neighborhood vigilante. Some were volunteers. Others were paid by local merchants. Most were members of tightly organized brigades that functioned like guilds or street gangs, depending on who was telling the story. You follow them from a distance, trying to stay inconspicuous. Their swagger is impossible to imitate unless you've hauled a flaming beam off someone's roof with bare hands. They shout greetings to merchants, step casually over slumbering stray dogs, and seem utterly unfazed by the knowledge that, at any moment, the city could catch fire and chew them up. By the 18th century, Edo had more than 100 official fire brigades. Each one was designated by a number and a direction. Iroha lines that range from Iroha to Hoha to Hohi too. You quickly notice that most of the men wear large symbols across their shoulders. Giant blocky kanji or stylized emblems dyed into the heavy coats they carry like capes. These weren't uniforms, they were declarations. You glance up again at the nearest fire tower. The man perched there rings a small bell once, then twice. A code, maybe. The Haikeshi barely flinch. It's just a routine check tonight. No smoke curling up from the thatch roofs yet. Still, there's an edge to the air, like the moment before thunder. Historians still argue whether the Haikeshi were truly as noble as they seemed. Official records show them risking their lives to save districts, leaping across rooftops, creating fire breaks by demolishing homes. But oral accounts suggest they were also brawlers, extortionists, even pyromaniacs when it suited their reputation. Some allege they even started small fires just to prove they could stop them. Nothing like lighting a blaze to remind people who keeps the city safe, right? The truth probably lives somewhere in between. What's certain is that they were idolized. Kids played Haikeshi in the alleys, merchants hung calligraphy praising their speed, women wrote haiku about them. Their posters sold almost as fast as kabuki actors. A breeze lifts a banner nearby, and you notice the scent of damp canvas mixed with camphor and sweat. One firefighter is carefully folding a massive coat made of layered cotton, its lining embroidered with cranes and waves. You'd expect fire gear to be plain, armored, practical. But this is haute couture with a death wish. One man notices your curiosity. Want to try it on? He jokes, holding up the coat. Bet it crushes your knees. You laugh nervously, but your eyes stay locked on the garment. In this moment, you realize what these men wore was part armor, part ego, part art. And in Edo, appearances mattered, especially if you were about to run into a burning building. The fire tower creaks again above you, a slow, metallic groan, like the city exhaling in its sleep. The Hikeshi begin their rounds, disappearing into alleys, vanishing behind bathhouses and merchant stalls. You follow the clang of their gear and the echo of their laughter, your footsteps silent on the cobblestones. Somewhere, a dog howls. The lanterns flicker. You feel the hairs on your neck rise. It might not be a false alarm after all. Section 2, you trail behind them as they weave through the lantern-lit maze of Edo's back streets. They move in loose formation, relaxed but purposeful, like a pack that knows the neighborhood is theirs. And it is. These are the Hikeshi, the firefighting crews of Edo, and they're not just men with buckets. They're folk heroes, brawlers, stylists, local royalty with soot under their nails and swagger in their step. You hear their voices bouncing off wooden walls, laughter, the occasional bark of a joke, the rhythmic slap of sandals against stone. They're heading toward a tea house, but this isn't a social call. One of the crew needs stitches. He split his palm on a rusted firehook during last week's blaze near the Asakusa temple. You wonder why he didn't go to a doctor. Turns out, he trusts the tea mistress more. Her father was a surgeon. Also, the tea's better than anything in the infirmary. This is your first hint that Hikeshi don't operate like a modern fire department. They're more like a neighborhood mafia, if that mafia also saved your grandma from a burning attic. Each brigade has its own territory, its own rituals, even its own taboos. And you better believe they don't like trespassers. The man leading this group wears his coat slung over one shoulder, and a coat so squishy that only the seeds of his pockets can rest in peace after a slight wind. The soldiers wear metal-tipped metal jackets with red stripes to mark their title and position them as a military mandate. Each brigade has its own tablet, and based on its membership, the metal tablet wears a symbol designating it as being one with its supporters. Each brigade has its own chief mandate. It warns of trouble and warns against foreigners being duped into violence. And they work, it's not laziness, it's fashion. His name, stitched in dark indigo on the lining, is partially visible, Genzaimon. His comrades call him Gen. He's not the official captain, but no one makes a move without his nod. You start to notice how they defer to each other. One guy lights the path with a lantern, another keeps checking rooftops, and a third whistles softly, a signal you'll soon learn means stand clear. It's organized chaos, wrapped in a heavy cotton coat and a hairstyle that requires an hour of oiling. Back in the early 1600s, when Edo was first booming under the Tokugawa shogunate, fires became so frequent that entire neighborhoods vanished overnight. The city needed a solution, and fast. So in 1718, the government formally established 48 official fire brigades, known as the Machibikeshi. These weren't samurai, they were commoners, often carpenters, laborers, or tradesmen, turned part-time heroes. They weren't alone, though. Higher up the chain were the daimyo bikeshi, firefighter units maintained by feudal lords to protect their own properties. And at the top, the jobikeshi, the shogun's elite force. But on the streets, where the fires actually raged, the machibikeshi ruled. Historians still debate whether these hierarchies helped or hindered. Some argue that having so many different types of brigades led to infighting. Others claim it encouraged innovation, as each group tried to outdo the others in bravery, style, or sheer volume of water buckets. Either way, it was chaotic. And somehow it worked, most of the time. You pause outside the tea house as the crew disappears inside. A paper screen slides shut behind them. From within comes the soft clink of ceramic cups and the low murmur of voices. A minute later, someone laughs loud enough to make a stray cat jump. You sit on a nearby crate, legs stretched out, watching the night unfold. Across the street, another Hikeshi brigade passes by. They're younger, flashier. One guy's coat is stitched with a tiger curling through waves. Another has a full-back tattoo of Fudo Mu, the Buddhist wrath deity, his face locked in an eternal snarl. The two brigades exchange brief glances, nothing more, but the tension crackles like dry bamboo. These men may share the same calling, but they don't necessarily share a drink. There were rivalries, fierce ones. Entire brawls erupted between crews over territory or reputation. Sometimes two brigades would race to the same blaze just to see who got there first. It wasn't just about saving property. It was about proving who deserved the community's respect. You once heard a story, probably half myth, about two brigades who arrived at a burning home at the same time. Rather than douse the flames, they fought each other in the street for 20 minutes while the house burned behind them. The owner apparently clapped. Quirky fact: Hikeshi were known for their celebratory awabi parties, where abalone and sake flowed like water and stories were exaggerated with every toast. Some of these men could barely read, but they recited heroic epics by heart, starring themselves naturally. A sudden shout breaks your reverie. Genzaemon and his crew are back outside, one man now sporting a fresh wrap around his hand. The tea house madam bows slightly as they depart, her white sleeves tucked neatly into her sash. You wonder what she thinks of them. Admiration? Annoyance? Both? They head off again, turning toward a cluster of wooden homes where paper lanterns dangle from eaves like sleepy fireflies. The crew begins their patrol in earnest now, splitting into pairs, sniffing the air for that first hint of smoke. Despite the bluster and bravado, you realize they take their job seriously. One man carries a horn, another a conch shell. These were Edo's emergency sirens, haunting, animalistic sounds that carried over rooftops like ghostly warnings. Your feet ache as you follow them. The stones underfoot are uneven, slick with evening mist. You slip once and catch yourself on a doorway. Inside, a family sips soup around a brazier, their shadows dancing on rice paper walls. It hits you how vulnerable these people are. One mistake, one spark, and everything vanishes. The Hikeshi know this. That's why they walk. That's why they watch. Someone murmurs from above. You look up to see a lookout stationed on a 2-story scaffold, eyes scanning the horizon, coat flapping like a banner. He nods toward Genzaemon, then points westward. A faint glow, unnatural, orange, licks the sky in the distance. The air stiffens. Boots quicken. No more jokes. The time for parading is over. A fire has begun. Section 3. The first thing you notice as the crew breaks into a sprint is the sound. Not the fire itself, that comes later, but the pounding of feet on stone, the clatter of wooden poles, and the whoop of warning calls echoing down alleyways. The Hishishi transform instantly. The lazy saunter is gone, replaced by coordinated motion and narrowed eyes. You struggle to keep up. Genzaemon tosses you a glance as he runs. Stay behind us if you want to live, he mutters, not unkindly, but not joking either. You pass sleeping homes and startled shopkeepers pulling shutters open. Children cling to their mothers, elders clutch bamboo walking sticks and hobble toward the canal edge. Someone yells, "Kajida! Fire!" and the city begins to inhale sharply, preparing for chaos. You round a corner, And there it is. Fire licking out the upper window of a lacquer shop, its glow reflected in puddles below. To the left, the building next door is still untouched, but not for long. The air smells sharp, oily, like roasted wood and panic. It's beautiful, in the same way a charging bull is beautiful, right before it gores you. Now you see the Hikeshi drop their fancy coats, and you finally understand why they wore them like cloaks. They're not for the dash, they're for the fight. Genzaimon and two others grab a nearby water barrel and begin soaking their coats, not a dainty sprinkle. No, they drench the garments until they slosh and squelch like wet haystacks. Another man climbs a scaffold with a long hooked pole, shouting orders as he ascends. You stare at the coats, sodden and dark now. They look absurdly heavy. No modern firefighter would wear such a thing. And yet, this was the Edo way. Protection through saturation. The thick, layered cotton could resist flame for a short time, but only if soaked, and soaked coats meant carrying an extra 70, sometimes 80 pounds on your back while leaping between rooftops. Historians still argue whether the strategy worked as intended or was more symbolic than effective. The coat certainly looked heroic, especially when flipped inside out to reveal elaborate designs, dragons, waves, birds of prey. But in the heat of a fire, how much did style help? There are accounts of men drowning after falling into canals with these waterlogged garments. Honor had a price tag, and it was heavy as hell. A shout goes up. The fire has spread to the adjoining rooftop. One Hikeshi, barefoot now, shirtless, climbs with an agility that borders on animal. His chest glistens with both sweat and tattoos. Phoenix wings across his collarbones, flames down his arms. You think for a second that he's shirtless for freedom of movement. But then the two-headed one-eyed dolphin sees the shouting man, jumps out of the water, climbs into the water. Then you realize, no, it's for show. Every climb is a performance, every rescue a stage. Nearby, two crew members wield a large cloth screen, trying to block the wind and slow the fire's spread. Another smashes a second-story window with his pole, then uses the hooked end to pull flaming beams onto the street, where others douse them with water from a bucket line that now stretches into the shadow. Your ears ring with the din. Wood cracking, men shouting, water sloshing. But amid it all, the coats are what draw your eye again and again. One hangs from a nail, steaming in the heat, its outer fabric dark as the night. You edge closer and notice something odd. On the inside, hidden from public view, is a breathtaking mural. This one shows Raijin, the god of thunder, hurling drums from a stormy cloud. The embroidery is painstaking. Every thread catches light like it was stitched with silk and lightning. You imagine the wearer flipping the coat mid-crisis, revealing the image to intimidate the fire, the gods, or rival Hikeshi. Maybe all three. And that was the paradox of Edo firefighting. Practicality wrapped in performance. These men didn't just fight fires. They performed their resistance. Their clothing wasn't just gear. It was pageantry. And yes, perhaps, a little bit of magic. Quirky fact, these coats were often custom-made by artists who also painted kabuki backdrops. They weren't cheap, and many Hikeshi went into debt commissioning their dream design. You'd think firemen wouldn't be vain, but here, ego and bravery were woven with the same thread. You dodge back as a piece of flaming wood collapses nearby. Genzaimon curses and waves for you to fall in behind a row of onlookers who've gathered. Idiots mostly, drawn like moths to heat and heroics. You obey, chest heaving, mind racing. A bucket slips, water splashes your sleeve, chilling your already clammy skin. The fire is receding now. That lacquer shop? Gone. But the buildings on either side? Saved, mostly. It's a victory, the Hikeshi way. As things calm, the men retrieve their coats, now mud-caked, wrinkled, and still steaming. The two buildings have been wiped out, but the freezer-side rain saved enough for the kishis to break open, and still steaming. We need to go. The fire is receding now. That lacquer shop, gone. but the buildings on either side saved mostly. It's a victory, the Haikeshi way. As things calm, the men retrieve their coats, now mud-caked, wrinkled, and still steaming. We see the paintbrush warehouse, the skin shop that cuts clothes and sells them. The lacquer, one of them laughs. "Smells better than last time," he says, wringing his sleeve. Another inspects a singed hem with the care of someone examining a battle wound. You're about to say something when you spot a small tag stitched near the coat's inner lining. It bears a name and a date, like a gravestone. Later, you learn that hikeshi often passed down their coats, and the embroidered inner image was sometimes added only after a fire. It wasn't just decorative, it was a story. Each panel of stitchwork marked a blaze survived, a life saved, a wall breached. Historians still discuss the symbolic function of these coats. Were they meant to invoke divine protection? Were they talismans? Status symbols? Probably all of the above. Some even argue that the coat was less about surviving the fire than being remembered afterward. As the last embers die down, the crew regathers. Genzaimon adjusts his coat, still damp, still ridiculous, and lights a pipe. He doesn't look triumphant, he looks tired. But when a small child scampers up and hands him a rice cake, his face softens. He takes it with a nod, and the kid beams like he's met a living god. You stay silent, watching the coats dry in the wind, their inner linings hidden once more. Until next time. Section 4. The morning sun hasn't yet crested the tiled roofs, but the streets of Edo are already stirring. The fire from last night has been contained. Charred beams and the acrid scent of burnt lacquer linger. But life resumes, as if nothing ever happened. You walk slowly behind the Hikeshi crew as they return to their base near the Nihonbashi district. Their soaked coats draped over shoulders or bundled like sleeping infants in their arms. Now that the panic has passed, you can really look at these garments. The outer layer, coarse and dark, is quilted with tight sashiko stitching, a maze of tiny white threads crisscrossing in perfect geometry. At first glance, the coats all look alike, but then you notice differences. Subtle crests, border designs, tiny initials sewn into seams. These weren't uniforms handed out by the city. They were bespoke, personal, sometimes even sacred. Inside the workshop, where wet gear is hung to dry, a young man spreads out one of the coats on the wooden floor and carefully flips it inside out. What was moments ago a dull, charcoal-colored exterior now reveals an explosion of color and symbolism. You crouch beside him. "Mine," he says proudly, tapping the silk dragon that coils up from the hem. "Took a year to finish. My aunt stitched the claws." You trace the fabric with your fingers, feeling the slight ridges of thread where the dragon's whiskers curl. It's absurdly beautiful. If it weren't faintly damp and smoke-scented, you'd swear it belonged in a gallery. In Edo, these coats were called hikeshi banten, and while they were, at their core, tools for survival, they also functioned as status symbols, markers of bravery, lineage, and individual flair. No two were alike. On the outside, anonymous, matching, stoic, but on the inside, rebellion. The coat you're holding features an ocean wave pattern known as saigeha, symbolizing resilience. Another nearby has a hawk mid-dive, yet another shows a pair of cranes, wings spread as if to lift the wearer out of the flames. It's easy to romanticize all this, standing in the gentle light of morning. But the truth is, most of these coats were never seen in full glory. The inner designs were only revealed after the fire, when the hikeshi turned them inside out for parades, memorials, or just to let the world know, "I was there. I made it." Quirky detail time. Some hikeshi didn't wait for the fire to be over. They'd flip their coats mid-blaze, showing off the inner embroidery as they charged into smoke. Suicidal? Probably. Theatrical? Definitely. Effective? Historians still argue whether the fire gods were impressed or just distracted. Theatrical was a little too strong. You help hang a few of the coats near the open wall, where a breeze rolls through like a sigh. Beside you, Genzaimon is talking quietly with a few older men. One of them wears a coat so faded it's hard to tell what the original design even was. But his stance, arms crossed, one eyebrow perpetually arched, makes it clear he's seen more fires than most temples have bells. You lean in closer and realize the man's coat features an old, hand-stitched kanji that reads mu, meaning nothingness. No animals, no waves, no gods. Just one stark symbol. You raise an eyebrow. He catches your look and says, "Sometimes, nothing is what gets you out alive." You don't argue. The workshop space doubles as a kind of shrine. On a shelf near the entrance, a row of wooden plaques, small memorial tablets, honors firefighters who didn't return. Some have names, others just nicknames. Little Hama, One-Eyed Kuma, Tall Kinta. Below them, offerings of dried fish, sake cups, and even a half-burnt sandal. You feel the weight of these coats differently now. They're not just heavy with water, they're heavy with memory. Ginzaimonin motions for you to follow him up a narrow ladder to the roof, where some of the younger Hikeshi are laying their coats flat under the sun. The rooftop overlooks a tight cluster of rooftops, all wooden, all sleeping under morning haze. "Look," he says, pointing. "Every single one of those houses is a fire risk, and every single one is someone's entire world." He's not being dramatic. Edo was a city of densely packed wooden homes, thatched roofs, open flame kitchens, and paper-thin walls. By some estimates, it burned down in part or whole nearly every decade, sometimes more than once. The people adapted, not by fireproofing, but by accepting destruction as part of life. Buildings were rebuilt, possessions replaced, but a good coat, a firefighter's coat, that stayed with you. There's a popular saying in Edo, "Kaji to kenka wa Edo no hana." Fire and fights are the flowers of Edo. The phrase is equal parts resigned and proud. Fires were expected, brawls between Hikeshi brigades, practically sport. And both were woven into the identity of the city like wood grain into a beam. The breeze kicks up. One coat flaps lazily. You catch sight of an inner lining featuring an octopus battling a flame. The octopus looks exhausted. You feel the same. You spend the rest of the morning listening to stories as the men clean their tools and repack ropes. One young firefighter, barely older than a schoolboy, tells you he's getting his first tattoo next month. "A wave and a hawk," he says proudly, "for speed and strength." You nod. But privately, you hope he's also getting some protective charms stitched into that coat of his, because no matter how gorgeous the lining is, it won't stop a falling beam. Section 5. You follow the crew down toward the Sumida River, where the air is cooler and tinged with brine. The sun climbs higher, catching on lacquered signs and tile roofs, but the Hikeshi seem unfazed. They're stripped down now, coats slung over shoulders, torsos bare and gleaming with sweat. If last night was duty, today is ritual. And for the Edo Hikeshi, part of that ritual involves skin and ink. You trail behind Genzaimon and his comrades to a tiny riverside bathhouse. The wooden sign creaks in the breeze, and the steam rolling from its vents carries the earthy scent of cedar and soap. Inside, the room is all chatter and splashing. No privacy, no ceremony. You hesitate at the threshold until someone waves you in. "We don't bite," a younger man laughs, "unless you're from the tow brigade." That earns a round of chuckles. You step into the warm fog and almost trip over a pile of discarded Geta sandals. And then you see them. Bodies like murals, backs like moving scrolls, tattoos everywhere. One man has a koi fish that winds from his shoulder to his hip, swimming upstream against what must have been hours, no, days, of needlework. Another's chest is inked with the thunder god Raijin, all fierce eyes and wind drums. A third sports a snarling tiger on his ribs, caught mid-roar, the fur shaded with such care you swear it ripples when he exhales. You've heard about Edo tattoos, Remitsumi, but seeing them in mass, you realize they're not just decoration. They're declarations. These are not gentle watercolors. They're bold, blue-black epics stitched into flesh. Back in the 18th century, these tattoos weren't just fashion. They're prophecy to souls. Otherwise, painted on them were blood-potent, tapped into bronze, tapped into gold. The firstborn Edo tattoos were missing their declaration. These are general packs of X. They're bold, blue packs, tapped into blood, armor, tapped into self-pity, and more than just pity. But more than just pity. They were armor, not physical, but social. Each designed marking bravery, allegiance, a history of withstanding pain. Getting one wasn't a weekend whim. It was a rite of passage. Done with hand-poked needles, using charcoal-based ink that sank deep into the dermis, the process could take months. And the pain? Sharp, slow, and constant. You sit on a low stool as someone hands you a cloth to wipe your brow. First time seeing this many? A voice asks. You nod. The speaker turns slightly, revealing a full back piece. A fire dragon, coiling up a bamboo ladder. The detail is astonishing. Each scale outlined, each plume of smoke inked with fading gray. Took me 3 summers, he says with a grin. Still got the ladder rungs to finish. There's a strange intimacy here. Men scrubbing one another's backs, laughing about scars, comparing new design. It's a far cry from the grim, militaristic vibe you'd expect from professional firefighters. But that's the paradox. Hikeshi weren't soldiers. They were performers, laborers, local toughs, and their tattoos were the costumes they wore beneath their coats. Quirky fact: some Hikeshi inked good luck charms onto their inner thighs. One even had a cat mid-pounce tattooed on his calf, with the words, "May it leap over the flame," underneath. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine superstition or just dark humor. Ginzaimon leans back into the hot water with a sigh. His chest is covered in an intricate karajishi, a mythical lion dog, eyes wide, teeth bared. But you notice something softer inked just below his collarbone. A pair of chrysanthemums. For my mother, he says quietly, catching your gaze. She hated fire. Grew up in a burned-out house. Silence falls for a beat. Then someone throws a bucket of water at someone else, and the room erupts into shouts and slaps and laughter again. The bathhouse owner, a wiry older man with no tattoos and very little patience, hollers at them to keep the water in the tubs. He's ignored completely. You begin to see how much of Edo's Hikeshi culture was built not just on bravery, but on bonding. These men trusted each other not just in battle, but in vulnerability. They trusted in each other. Somewhere in the midst of panic, they turned to the small bonding and the idea of reconnection. Like Tim, these men sacrificed everything for each other. They tattooed their skin, fought side by side, ate from the same bowls, and often lived together in cramped barracks above storehouses or next to firewatch towers. Outside, a bell rings. A soft, rhythmic chime. No fire this time, just the afternoon signal marking a shift change. Some of the men stretch and prepare to leave. Others lounge longer, letting the heat ease the ache from yesterday's climb and collapse. The sun spins. Tomorrow, Monday, July 15th, 2019. You notice a scuffle beginning near the bathhouse exit. 2 Hikeshi from rival brigades, eyeing each other across the tatami mats. One makes a crude joke. The other replies with something sharper. You brace for a fight. But instead of fists, they compare scars. One on a shoulder, the other across a knee. Tetsu got his falling off the pagoda, someone shouts. Landed on a chicken coop. Better than your fall into the river, another laughs. Then, one says, something falls into the pagoda, someone shouts. Tetsu landed on a chicken coop. Better than your fall into the river, another coat weighed more than you. The near brawl dissolves into applause and jeering. For Hikeshi, fighting was less about fury than theater. The bathhouse scuffles, like the rooftop rescues, were performances, sometimes choreographed, sometimes spontaneous, always remembered. You ask Genzaimon if he's ever been in a real fight with another brigade. He smirks. Define real, he says. Then, it's all for show, until it's not. Historians still debate whether these rivalries were genuinely dangerous or just an outlet in a city where frustration smoldered like tinder. Some records suggest fatalities. Others read more like kabuki scripts, elaborate brawls with clear rules and post-battle drinks. By the time you step back outside, the sun is high and the streets are alive again. Genzaimon slings his towel over his shoulder, tattoos glinting faintly under sweat and steam. You coming? He asks, nodding toward the station. We've got drills today, and then maybe a bowl of eel. You follow, knowing full well that this life, equal parts duty and drama, soot and style, is as strange as it is captivating. And maybe that's the point. Section 6. You return to the firehouse with Genzaimon and his crew, walking beneath rows of fluttering Noren curtains painted with the brigade's crest. It's early afternoon now, and Edo hums with the low murmur of market traders and distant bells. But inside the station house, it's grooming hour. Yes, grooming. One by one, the Hikeshi settle into low stools in front of small bronze mirrors, combs in hand and pots of thick, oily pomade close by. And just like that, you're backstage at a Vanity Fair for the toughest men in town. This is where the real rituals begin. You blink as one man pulls out a slender iron tool and begins heating it over a charcoal brazier. It's a kogai used to shape and fix the elaborate top knots worn by Edo men, especially those with reputations to maintain. Hikeshi may have faced collapsing beams and infernos, but heaven forbid a single hair be out of place. You perch quietly near the wall, watching as they smear Binsukeabura, a fragrant pomade made from wax and essential oils, through thick black hair. The scent is surprisingly sweet, like camphor and plum, and it clings to the air. One man grunts. Smells like we're prepping for kabuki. Another shrugs. If we're gonna die in fire, might as well look good doing it. You laugh, then quickly smother it when you realize no one else does. Truth is, in Edo period firefighting culture, appearance mattered. The wild hair, the confident walk, the tattooed body, it all worked together to create an aura of fearless masculinity. This wasn't just for vanity's sake. Hikeshi wanted the townspeople to recognize them, to remember them, to trust them. In a city where entire neighborhoods could vanish overnight, image was part of morale, and part intimidation. You learned that rival brigades sometimes strutted through each other's neighborhoods, not to start fires, but to start drama. And nothing announced, we're better than you, quite like 10 men with glistening hair, matching coats, and the collective aura of a boy band made entirely of sledgehammers. Historians still argue whether the Hikeshi's obsessive grooming was a cultural quirk or a conscious tool for social influence. Some say it helped ease community fears during disasters. If they look calm and sharp, maybe everything's okay. Others believe it was performative masculinity turned up to 11, especially in a society where samurai monopolized military prestige and commoners had to find glory elsewhere. And let's not overlook the geta. Yes, the clunky wooden sandals. In the corner, a man is polishing the lacquer on his tall geta, the kind with 2 elevated teeth that click against the pavement with every step. He holds them like sacred relics, using a cloth to buff the wood until it shines like river stone. These weren't exactly built for firefighting agility, but they were built for visibility. The clack-clack was unmistakable. You could hear a Hiseishi coming before you saw him. Tall geta for tall tales, someone jokes, slipping his on and rising a good 5 inches. Quirky detail? Some Hikeshi carved poems or love confessions into the base of their sandals. You wouldn't see it unless they were barefoot. But when they kicked off their geta before a fire or a brawl, the messages remained like secret echoes in the dust. The vanity even extended to accessories. A couple of men sport braided cords around their waists with engraved charms. Little masks, carved wooden figures, iron fire hooks no bigger than a finger. One has a folding fan tucked into his sash. For the ladies, he says with a wink. It might sound absurd, all this fashion in the face of danger, but you begin to understand. These were working-class men thrust into heroism. They didn't have titles or land or kimonos made of imported silk, but they had presence, they had style, and they made sure you remembered them for it. Ginzaimon finishes tying his top knot and squints into the mirror. Injanemon, you too, preserve the faith of a Gino. Like preserve the faith of a Gino. Preserve the faith of a Gino. Like the preserve the faith of a Gino. Preserve the faith of a Gino. Preserve the faith of a Gino. Like the preserve the faith of a Gino. Preserve the faith of a Gino. This sacrifice was intended to purge any scraps of Italian sanity into the cold unconsciousness of the century. He's an evil who shot good enough, he mutters, even though it's perfect. He turns to you. Your hair's a mess, by the way. You laugh, and this time it's aloud. One of the younger firefighters enters carrying a bundle of fresh white towels and a small tin of hakubaiko, a tooth powder made from burnt shells and charcoal. He dumps it onto a tray next to a row of toothbrush twigs. If your breath stinks during the fire, the gods won't help, he says solemnly. The men line up like it's part of the drill. Brush, spit, rinse. Grooming isn't vanity here. It's identity. It's ritual. And it's power. Historians love to debate how much of this was cultural versus psychological. Were they truly preening for confidence? Or were these rituals a way to gain control in a life where fire could consume everything without warning? Either way, it worked. They moved like men with destiny, braided into their top knots. After everyone's cleaned up, Genzaimon leads the crew out into the open yard for drills. Even here, there's a rhythm, a kind of choreography, as they hoist ladders and snap hooks into place. You notice how each man's outfit is just slightly different in cut or stitching, but collectively they move like a single unit, like a parade, like a storm in formation. It's not hard to imagine crowds gathering to watch even these drills, and they often did. Hikeshi were public figures, admired like kabuki actors and wrestlers. Some brigades even staged mock fires for festivals, climbing tall ladders in their soaked coats just to show off. One man balances upside down on a rung, with his legs spread and arms raised like wings. The others cheer. You gape. That was just for show, right? You ask. Everything's for show, Genzaimon replies. Not looking at you, you stand quietly, watching the late afternoon sun catch the gold threads in someone's coat as it flutters on a drying line nearby. These men, with their oily hair and engraved geta and lion dog tattoos, are many things, but subtle, never. Never. Section 7. The sun dips again toward the western horizon, washing Edo in amber light. You follow the Hikeshi as they meander from the firehouse toward the marketplace. Their afternoon drills are finished, their coats mostly dry, and the city, for now, is quiet. But there's an edge to their walk. Not quite parade, not quite patrol. It's more like a rolling ripple of presence, moving through the neighborhood. It's more like a rolling ripple of presence, moving through the neighborhood. As you walk, you begin to notice something. Women watching. From doorways, balconies, market stalls, they glance. Some with casual familiarity, others with faint smiles, and a few with eyes that linger too long to be mere curiosity. Hikeshi, it seems, are not just guardians of the city. They are the stars of this quiet stage. But not all stories are visible from the street. You stop outside a small tailor shop near the canal, a nondescript place with weathered signage and a pot of chrysanthemums wilting by the door. Genzaimon ducks inside. You follow, ducking under the Norin curtain. Inside it smells of indigo dye and rice glue. Bolts of thick cotton are stacked along the walls, and in the back, a woman sits cross-legged on a mat, needle dancing between her fingers. She doesn't look up. "The lining tore again, didn't it?" she says flatly. Genzaimon grins sheepishly and unrolls his coat. A long rip snakes up the embroidered lion's back. The woman sighs, sets aside her tea, and begins inspecting the damage. This is where you begin to understand the unseen half of Edo's firefighting world. Women, mothers, sisters, wives, lovers, were everywhere, if you knew where to look. They stitched the coats, they boiled the dye, they scrubbed the blood from soaked garments and repaired the seams when heroism frayed the fabric. They also dug trenches, passed buckets, and hauled water during real fires. Quietly, out of frame. The woman, her name is Kinu, gestures for you to sit. You do. She doesn't ask who you are. She simply begins recounting how her grandmother stitched coats for the Ko Brigade, how her mother married a Hikeshi captain, and how she herself vowed never to. And yet here she is, sliding her needle through Genzaimon's coat like it's her own skin. You glance around and notice more garments draped across bamboo rods, some half-finished, their linings blank like waiting pages. One shows a spider lily curling around a dagger. Another, a stylized carp leaping from a ring of fire. Each one a collaboration between Hikeshi and artisan, between danger and love. Quirky detail. Some women embroidered secret messages into the coats, hidden in wave patterns, tucked into feathers, curled into the petals of stitched chrysanthemums. Tiny confessions, prayers, warnings. Unless you knew where to look, you'd never see them. "Do you ever wear one?" you ask Kinu. She snorts. Too heavy, too loud, and they smell like wet dogs. But her fingers are gentle as she folds the torn lining, pressing the fabric like it's a child's blanket. You realize it's not about the glamour. It's about the care. The women in Edo's firefighting culture were invisible scaffolding. Without them, none of this would stand. Historians still argue whether these women should be considered part of the Hikeshi tradition. Official records exclude them, but oral history remembers. The city remembered. And that's sometimes louder than ink. As dusk settles, Kinu finishes her work and hands Genzaimon the repaired coat. "Try not to show off so much next time," she mutters. He winks and gives her a small folded paper. Payment, maybe, or a note. She doesn't open it, just tucks it into her sleeve. Back outside, the air is cooler. Lamps are being lit one by one along the market's edge. The crew reassembles, nods exchanged, silent signals passed. Genzaimon slips the coat over his shoulder again. You look at it and realize you'd never know it had been torn, except for one new stitch in crimson thread, right at the lion's tail. A mark of repair. A signature, maybe. You catch Kinu watching from the door. She doesn't wave. Further down the road, you hear a commotion. Two women arguing loudly over the price of rice. Children darting between their skirts. One trips and falls. A Hikeshi moves instinctively, swift, graceful, catches the child before she hits the ground, ends her back, walks on. No one applauds, but you see the mother's eyes linger, just for a moment. Back at the firehouse, a few older women are preparing a simple meal. Grilled fish, miso soup, bowls of pickled radish. No ceremony, just nourishment. You recognize one of them from the shrine wall inside, the sister of a fallen Hikeshi. She doesn't speak, she just stirs, serves, and disappears into the back. This is the other half of the glory, the quiet half, the half no one stitched onto coats or carved into sandals, the half that kept the fire from spreading in ways no water bucket could fix. You sit with Genzaimon and the others as the meal begins. Chopsticks click, soup steams. A few soft jokes ripple through the group. No one mentions the fire from the night before. No one mentions Kinu's stitch, but you'll remember it. Because some threads hold more than just fabric. They hold stories and secrets. and the shape of someone who was never meant to be center stage, but without whom the play collapses entirely. Section 8. After dinner, the air turns crisp with nightfall, and the crew gets to work checking their tools. You follow them to the rear courtyard, where a series of racks hold a curious array of firefighting equipment. None of it looks quite like what you'd expect. No hoses, no helmets, no axes with polished metal heads. Instead, it looks like someone raided a temple armory and a construction site at the same time. Genzaimon grabs a long pole, easily twice his height, and hands it to a younger member of the crew. "Practice," he mutters. "If it wobbles, it drops." You tilt your head, studying the pole. It's tipped with a massive iron hook, sharp enough to tear through roofing tiles and timber. This is the matoibo, one of several specialized poles used by Edo's Hikeshi. And it's no exaggeration to say that the pole was their sword, their banner, and their crowbar, all in one. You glance around and spot others. A tobeguchi, shaped like a battle axe. A sasumata, with two prongs designed to pin or pull flaming debris. Even a kaginawa. A rope with a clawed hook for scaling walls. Some are engraved. Some are wrapped in lacquered cloth for grip. All look like they were forged in a world that saw fire as both enemy and spectacle. One particularly tall pole stands upright against a shrine-like structure. Now, not so easy to see, not like some abundant mirror. The pole looks like a shadow. Its top is adorned with a huge, decorative tuft of cloth, red and black streamers that shiver slightly in the wind. This, Genzaimon tells you, is the matoi itself, the banner of the brigade. Quirky fact? When a brigade arrived at a fire, their matoi bearer would climb the tallest nearby structure, often a burning one, and wave the banner furiously overhead. It served no practical purpose in extinguishing flames, but it let everyone know which team had arrived and claimed the glory. You watch as a wiry man you've never seen before picks up the matoi. He's older, quieter, and his every movement is crisp and rehearsed. Genzaimon leans toward you. "That's Okame, our best climber." You nod, unable to take your eyes off the process. Okame places one foot onto the wooden ladder lashed to a tower frame and begins climbing. The pole is strapped to his back, swaying gently like a dragon's tail. Each rung creaks under his weight. When he reaches the top, he plants his feet wide and hoists the matoi above his head. The streamers flutter. He spins it once, twice, then freezes in place. Everyone below claps, not wildly, but with respect. "Symbol matters," Genzaimon says, "especially when it's chaos. You see that matoi, you know we're here." Historians still argue whether the matoi was born out of practicality or theater. Some say it helped coordinate bucket brigades. Others claim it was mainly psychological, reminding the populace that their guardians had arrived, and rival brigades who got there second might as well go home. You're invited to inspect one of the tobeguchi. The fire axe, and it's heavier than you expect. The blade is broad, notched with use, and the handle wrapped in layers of oiled cloth. Genzaimon explains how they'd use it to smash open doors, knock down flaming walls, or cut escape paths through tangled rafters. "Fire doesn't wait," he says. "You break, or you burn." In another rack lies a curious tool, shaped like a pitchfork, but dull-tipped. This, someone tells you, is a hoko. Not for poking, but for bracing collapsing walls or leveraging beams. Each tool has a purpose, and each firefighter trains with all of them, even if they specialize. A few of the crew begin mock drills, racing between wooden dummies and lashing together ladders. One man demonstrates the rooftop crawl, shimmying low along a pitch without dislodging tiles, all while carrying a 70-pound coat and a 6-foot hook. You try to imagine doing it at night, in smoke, while the roof burns. Another grabs a bucket leather with a bamboo rim and begins slinging water at a painted flame on the courtyard wall. It's part game, part drill. The others cheer when he hits center mass, boo when he misses. You're told that during an actual fire, dozens of citizens would form bucket lines, often women and children, while the Hikeshi cleared space and dismantled structures to create fire breaks. They weren't just fighting the blaze, they were fighting time. Quirky detail? Some bucket brigades used chants or songs to maintain rhythm. Quirky detail. Some bucket brigades used chants or songs to maintain rhythm. A famous one went, "Water flows, fire goes. Pass the hope, not the hose." Okay, maybe that's a modern paraphrase, but the spirit stands. Tools were passed down like heirlooms. One of the older firefighters shows you his father's kaganawa. The steel still strong despite the decades. He rubs his thumb along the grip, where a tiny lotus blossom has been engraved. "He added that the day I was born," the man says, "climbed a flaming bathhouse with this." You wonder if someday Genzaimon will hand down his hook, or if it will hang on a shrine wall, incense curling around it like smoke. Historians like to point out how primitive Edo's firefighting tools were compared to later technology, but that misses the point. These were tools of improvisation, built for a wooden world. The hooks, the poles, the ropes, they weren't crude, they were customized, they were forged in the rhythms of the city, and they worked, more often than not. Fires burned, buildings fell, but Edo still stood. As the drills wind down, someone stumbles and drops a hook with a crash. The clang echoes through the courtyard. No one laughs. Everyone pauses. Genzaimon walks over, picks it up, and places it back in the rack. "Tools are like teeth," he says softly. "Lose one, you'll feel it every time you bite." The men nod. The moment passes. The night grows deeper. Somewhere, a shamisen begins to play. The city exhales again. And you? You're beginning to see the firehouse not as a place of chaos, but of choreography, of tools with history, of movements with meaning, and of men who learn to dance on rooftops carrying the weight of both smoke and spectacle. Section 9. The stillness breaks with a cry. "Kajida! Kajida!" You freeze mid-step as the shout rings out again, this time louder, joined by the panicked barking of a dog and the rapid slap of bare feet against pavement. Genzaimon and his crew drop everything. They don't even look at each other. Their movements are instant, practiced. One man grabs the matoi, another swings a ladder pole over his shoulder. He says he's uncovered anonymous information. He says it's total nonsense. Genzaimon and his crew drop everything. They don't even look at each other. Their movements are instant, practiced. One man grabs the matoi for his shoulder. He says, "It's total nonsense." Genzaimon and his crew drop everything. They don't even look at each other. Their movements are synchronous, smoothly cadent. They snap you. You run to the side like you've been told. This is not a drill. As the firefighters disappear down the alley, you chase the sound upstream. The street narrows, lit only by flickering lanterns, and smoke begins to thicken in the air like fog turned sinister. A burning scent curls into your nose, oily and dry at the same time. Not yet choking, but growing. By the time you reach the scene, the fire is visible. Orange light blooms from the second floor of a shop front, painting the eaves above in writhing shadows. "It's a paper merchant," someone whispers. Of course, nothing in this city is more flammable than paper. You stumble backward as a surge of townspeople rushes past, some with buckets, others just dragging belongings, bedding, scrolls, a teapot. An old man falls, clutching a bundle to his chest like a child. No one stops. Fire changes everything. And then you hear it. The rhythm. Water buckets begin to pass, one to another, hand to hand. It's a cadence, a beat in motion. Splash, grab, pass, return, over and over. No shouting, no chaos, just relentless flow. This is Edo's answer to fire. A system so deeply ingrained, it doesn't require orders. It just happens. You catch sight of Genzaemon on the roof. How he got up there, you don't know. He's prying tiles away with a hooked pole, creating space for another man to wedge a ladder between beams. Below, a line of townspeople forms a human chain, flinging water up in great arcs that fall short more often than they hit. Still, no one stops. A woman runs past you with a child strapped to her back and a bucket in each hand. You try to help. She waves you off. "Don't slow me down," she says, not unkindly. Quirky detail? Some Edo households kept their family heirlooms in wicker baskets by the door, just in case. Fires came often enough that people lived ready to flee. There were even fire maps, published and sold to help citizens plan escape routes, complete with illustrations of where to throw your buckets. Historians still marvel at how Edo citizens turned firefighting into collective choreography. There were no sirens, no electric signals, just wood clappers, human networks, and centuries of muscle memory. On the roof, one firefighter leans out dangerously far, his coat soaked and plastered to his skin. He swings his pole like a giant chopstick, prying off flaming timber before it can collapse inward. Another man braces him with a rope. They shout something to each other. Words you can't hear, but the urgency needs no translation. With prayers in their hearts, the men cautiously embrace and elevate the cypress. A gust of wind pushes the fire into the next structure, a tailor's shop. A banner with stitched cranes begins to blacken at the corners. And still, the line of buckets continues. You spot the Matoi bearer scrambling up the adjacent roof. He climbs with eerie calm, plants his feet wide, and begins waving the banner in long, sweeping circles. The crowd cheers. It's not that the fire is gone, it's that their brigade has arrived. Symbol matters. You turn to see a group of children watching from a safe distance. One imitates the water bucket toss, lifting an imaginary pail. Another mimics Genzaemon's rooftop pose, arms wide, balance precarious. Even in the smoke, they're learning. Suddenly, a scream. A woman's voice from the back of the tailor's shop. "My husband! He's still inside!" Before you realize it, Genzaemon is already off the roof, slipping down a rain pipe with the ease of someone born to it. He vanishes into the alley, shouting something over his shoulder. The others respond without question. One man takes his place, another steadies the ladder. You wait. Seconds pass. More. And then, a figure staggers from the smoke. Genzaemon, half dragging, half carrying a man wrapped in a scorched blanket. They collapse just outside the burning doorway. A woman rushes forward, falls to her knees beside them, clutching the man's face and sobbing. The crowd parts like silk. Genzaemon coughs once, then again, harder. Someone hands him a flask of water. He downs it and waves them off. "Coat?" he croaks. "Check my coat." The embroidery on the inside has begun to bubble. Not from design, from heat. The story stitched into its lining now has a scorched chapter. Historians still argue whether these acts of bravery were always so poetic. Were Hikeshi always so noble? Probably not. There are records of rival brigades arriving late, of fires fought half-heartedly, of petty arguments over jurisdiction while temples burned. But tonight, no one questions Genzaemon's valor. Tonight, he saved a man. The fire is under control now. The crowd disperses slowly, like embers drifting away. A few women begin scrubbing soot from the cobblestones. Someone places a burnt sandal on a stone ledge as if marking the place. And then, something beautiful. The bucket line, still half-formed, begins to chant. A low, rhythmic hum. You don't catch the words, but the cadence is unmistakable. Thanks. Thanks to the water. Thanks to the pole. Thanks to the ones who climbed when everyone else fled. The chant fades with the smoke. You look at Genzaemon. His hair is a mess. His coat is ruined. And yet, His eyes are steady, like the embers will never touch them. Section 10. The morning after the fire, the air feels too still, like the city is holding its breath. You follow Genzaimon through a winding maze of alleys, stepping over charred wood and cracked roof tiles, past a cluster of neighbors murmuring around the remnants of the tailor's shop. Smoke still lingers in the air, lazy and white, curling like incense. But there's no ceremony here, only ashes. A boy kicks at the ruins with a stick, uncovering a melted spool of thread. A woman retrieves a scorched bundle of silk, holds it to her chest, then lets it drop. Nearby, someone sweeps blackened dust from their doorstep, as if tidiness might will the structure back into existence. But as you move deeper into the district, whispers grow sharper. Tones shift from grief to suspicion. Too fast, that blaze. Third one this month. Could be them again. You glance at Genzaimon. He hears it too. He says nothing, just clenches his jaw. You're about to ask who them is when a man rounds the corner, slamming a bamboo pole against the pavement. His coat is darker than Genzaimon, his top not neater. The crest on his back? Not from this neighborhood. A rival brigade. Two more appear behind him, their coats crisp, their gait slow and deliberate, showing up late, yet walking like they own the ruins. Genzaimon steps forward, voice low but firm. This isn't your turf. The other man smiles, just checking the damage, making sure no one missed a spark. His gaze lingers on the wreckage, but his meaning is clear. This fire might have been a message. You've heard of this, of arson used as protest, revenge, even recruitment. In Edo, where landowners and shopkeepers often held grudges like heirlooms, fire could be more than disaster. It could be a weapon. And when the Hikeishi weren't fighting flames, they were fighting each other. Historians still argue over how many fires were accidents and how many were lit intentionally. Records from the time are vague. Some suspicious fires were blamed on vagrants or ghosts, others on disgruntled apprentices or outcast craftsmen. But everyone knew the subtext: gangs, politics, retaliation. Genzaimon doesn't back down, but you can feel the tension rise like heat from a stove. No one shouts. No one moves. But the energy between them is as dry and tight as rice paper in summer. Then, thank the gods, a woman's voice calls from behind. Enough! Kinu. She walks straight between the men, carrying a bundle of folded coats. She doesn't look left or right, just says, if you've got something useful to offer, do it. If not, leave us to the rebuilding. Kinu says, if you've got something useful to offer, do it. If not, leave us to the rebuilding. Nasasa doesn't look like it will today. Nasasyu. Nasasyu. Nasa no mogi motosuni metaki yuyoshi. No mogi sakamo oka uname okato. Nasas, the rival Hikeishi hesitate. They're not sure what to do with a woman who speaks like that. Eventually, they turn. No words, just the echo of geta clicking against stone. Genzaimon exhales. Was it them? You ask, once they're gone. Does it matter? He replies. Fire came. We fought it. But later, you learn the merchant whose shop burned had refused to pay protection money to another brigade's associate. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. Quirky fact. Some Hikeishi brigades ran like criminal enterprises, taking bribes, extorting businesses, and sometimes even offering discounted fire coverage. Nice bathhouse you've got here, they might say. Shame if it went up next festival. It's hard to reconcile that with the man who dragged someone out of a burning house last night. But that's the contradiction of Edo. Natia, Thati, firefighting was public service and performance, and sometimes darkly profit. You return with the crew to their base, where a meeting is already underway. The elder of the district, a stoop-backed man with hands like rope knots, listens as two residents recount what they saw. "I heard a window smash before the fire started. There was a man in a red sash near the alley. I smelled oil." None of this is definitive. One alternately doubts, suspects, confirms, and is finally satisfied. None of this is definitive, but the Hikeshi nod, file it away. They'll be watching. In Edo, where official law was slow and paper-thin, the Hikeshi served as both firemen and informal police. Their presence kept petty crime in check, but sometimes blurred lines between justice and intimidation. Were they guardians or enforcers? Historians still debate this dual identity. Some describe the Hikeshi as honorable defenders. Others depict them as street kings in uniform, balancing duty with dominance. Both might be true. As the meeting ends, Genzaimon pulls you aside. "Come on, there's something I want to show you." You follow him out of the station, down a side road you haven't walked before. It's quieter here. The buildings lean in toward each other, and the sunlight filters in thin slants. He stops at a small shrine, tucked between two merchant houses. It's easy to miss. Incense coils hang from its eaves. A carved fox stands guard at the gate. Genzaimon lights a stick of incense and places it before the shrine. "For the ones we didn't reach," he says. You nod. There's a wooden tablet here with names scratched into it. Not fancy, not painted, just scratched. By blade, by nail, by someone in a hurry to remember. Among them is a name you don't recognize. Genzaimon's finger rests there for a moment. "My brother," he says softly. You don't ask how. Some stories are told only in silence, in smoke, in scars. The sun shifts again, casting the fox statue in golden shadow. You realize for the first time that fighting fire in Edo wasn't just about water and courage. It was about politics, about pride, about vengeance and justice, and the razor-thin line between them. And most of all, it was about who you trusted to walk the line when the flames came. Section 11 later that week, the city burns again. Not just a house, not even a street. This time, it's a whole district. Gone in hours, swallowed by a blaze so vast, it paints the sky blood red before the sun even sets. From a rooftop you watch, stunned, as orange fingers leap from one building to the next, faster than you imagine possible. Wind roars through narrow alleys like a bellows, feeding the flames with perfect cruelty. Genzaimon doesn't curse, doesn't flinch. He simply pulls his coat over his shoulders, ties the sash tight, and says, "Move." You run with him and the others toward the source, dodging carts and tearful merchants, families hauling futons and pickled rashes, whole lives condensed into hurried bundles. It's the temple district this time, full of wood, lacquer, and centuries of unburned luck. But even temples burn. You reach the front line, and it's clear. This won't be a containment job. It's a sacrifice. The crew springs into action, not fighting the fire head-on, but demolishing buildings. You blink as Genzaimon hacks through the wall of a bathhouse, not to save it, but to bring it down before the flames jump. Another man climbs to a roof ridge and knocks tiles loose, sending them crashing into the courtyard to disrupt the blaze's path. This is firebreak work, the last resort of a city that knows fire too well. Historians call it yakudashi, the strategy of preemptively destroying buildings to control a blaze. Edo's residents, for the most part, accepted this. They knew it was either tear down 10 homes or lose 200. It was brutal, but it worked, at least sometimes. Quirky detail? Some families built their homes with collapsible walls, not for privacy, but so firefighters could knock them down faster in case of emergency. Imagine designing your house with built-in failure points. That's life in a city that's burned to the ground dozens of times. You see a crew forming a bucket line at a canal. They're using wooden boards to funnel water toward a burning bridge. but the wind shifts, and the fire leaps it anyway. A merchant weeps openly as flames swallow his storehouse. Genzaemon grabs his shoulder. "That's wood and coin. You're not—" The man doesn't move, doesn't blink, just watches the timbers fall. This is what Edo does. It burns, and then it builds again. You turn, and across the fire line you see another brigade. Different crest, different coats, ripping up a garden fence to use as scaffolding. There's no brawl this time, just silent agreement. The city comes first. That's the rule. Until it's not. Suddenly a shout. They're cutting through the shrine gate. Genzaimon's face tightens. That's not their zone. A brief standoff follows. Two captains argue over who has the right to decide which sacred space gets torn down. You want to scream? There's no time, but they don't hear. Or they do, and they just don't care. Or they do, and they just don't care. Historians still argue whether these rivalries helped or hindered Edo's survival. Some say competition pushed brigades to act faster, bolder. Others believe that every territorial scuffle cost lives. The truth is probably both. Bravado saved half the city, pride doomed the other. In the end, the gate falls, not from fire, but from hands, and the blaze moves on. By dusk, the wind dies, the fire weakens. Smoke drifts upward in towering pillars, like incense offered to the gods of chaos. You stand with Genzaemon atop a crumbling beam, both of you covered in soot, breathing hard. The city glows beneath the haze. Smoldering, wounded, but intact enough to rebuild. And Edo will rebuild. It always does. In fact, it's practically a sport. After every major fire, carpenters flood the streets, scavenging usable timbers, measuring new lots with bamboo rods. What new lots meant to the process definitely mattered. And at the very end of the lot, there's a home, smoldering, wounded, but families squat in alley corners planning layouts for homes that haven't even been drawn yet. You watch as a group of children, barefooted and loud, begin stacking stones for a new courtyard. One of them pretends to be a Hikeshi, shouting orders and waving an imaginary pole. Genzaemon smiles faintly. That's how I started. You laugh. Wrecking houses? Pretending to save them? Nearby, someone hammers a post into the ground, already claiming space for a rebuilt shop. At fast, as if the fire was just a necessary clearing of space. Quirky tradition? Some neighborhoods held post-fire festivals, offering rice cakes and sake to thank the Hikeshi, but also to honor the ashes, as if destruction had to be greeted like a dinner guest, bowed to, served, sent on its way. It's not romantic, it's pragmatic. You don't live in a wooden city without learning to love the smell of new timber. Later that night, you walk the edge of the burn zone. Still warm earth crumbles beneath your sandals. You come across a tiny shrine, a hokora, that somehow survived. Blackened around the base, but standing. Inside it, a single prayer tablet. Words scorched away. You sit for a while beside it, letting your breath slow. In the distance, the echo of clappers. The fire is gone, but the city still watches. You think back to something Genzaemon said when the bridge burned. We don't fight fire to win. We fight it to remind it we're still here. And maybe that's why Edo always rose again, not out of defiance, but out of sheer stubborn rhythm. Brick cities fall and stay down. Wooden cities? They dance. Section 12. The sun hangs low again as you find yourself in the middle of what feels less like a fire station and more like a battlefield headquarters. Two firefighting brigades have converged, a clash not of swords, but of wills and colors. You see them now, the warriors of smoke and soot, not fighting the fire, but each other. Their matching coats, bold with emblems and colors, flash like rival banners in the dying light. The banners come in colors, sharp and cold, like so many axes branded in blood. A painting of shipping that drapes over a flat gray background. A painting of shipping that drapes over a flat gray background. The banners hang. The tension is thick, the kind that could snap like an overused rope. You remember the Matoi banners waving high, the carefully stitched dragons and cranes that marked each brigade's identity. Here, those emblems aren't just decoration, they're territorial flags, the colors of a turf war fought without weapons, but with pride and punch. Two captains step forward, their voices loud and sharp, words cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. It's a contest of claims, of who arrived first, who deserves the honor of the blaze, who gets the loot and prestige that come with controlling the fire scene. The crowd watches, some cheering, others nervous. It's a spectacle, a ritualized duel where the rules aren't always clear. You see fists raised, then lowered, eyes locked, waiting for the first misstep. Then, suddenly the fight ignites. Not with fists, but with chants. A deep, rhythmic shouting echoes down the street, the cries of each brigade calling out their allegiance, their bravery, their claim. Quirky fact: these chants often referenced historic battles, mythical heroes, or even local legends, transforming firefighting into a living saga. Historians still debate whether these war cries were a genuine morale booster or simply noise to mask the chaos of the actual fire. The clash is as much about honor as it is about survival. One man steps forward, wielding his fire hook like a staff, eyes blazing as fiercely as the flames behind him. Another responds with a towering shout, swinging a pole adorned with his brigade's matoi. The air vibrates with unspoken challenges and the weight of history. You sense that for these men, the fire is a backdrop, a stage where they perform courage, claim status, and settle scores. The battle drifts through the streets like smoke, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but always present. And yet, amidst the rivalry, there's an unspoken respect. Each man knows that when the flames come, they'll need each other's backs. The city depends on it. Historians still argue whether these rivalries led to better firefighting or distracted from it. Some records speak of brigades delaying action just to outshine competitors. Even more than battles, men who can battle and beat their wily nature rely on each other. Others recount moments when rival crews united, saving entire districts from destruction. You watch as the fight dissolves into laughter and slaps on the back. The men resume their positions, coats catching the light like armor. Edo's firefighting was more than a job. It was a theater of honor, rivalry and brotherhood, stitched together by flame and pride. One boy darts ahead, waving a crudely carved wooden firehook. "I'm Genzamon!" he shouts, chest puffed out. Another follows with a tattered coat draped over his shoulders, proclaiming himself the bearer of the Matoi banner. Their laughter rings through the alleys, a soundtrack of childhood dreams wrapped in soot and smoke. You watch as they gather near a small shrine dedicated to fire protection. Here, the tales of Hikeshi heroism are told in whispered prayers and offerings of rice and sake. The shrine is modest, but to these kids, it's a palace of myth. Stories of Hikeshi's daring rooftop rescues, their signature flaming coats, and tattoos that told tales longer than the longest night are passed down with reverence. The kids pantomime the climbs and bucket lines, imitating the proud stance of their heroes. For them, the Hikeshi embody courage, strength, and honor, qualities that elevate them above the daily grind of Edo's smoky chaos. You notice how some children have small badges or charms clipped to their belts, miniature versions of the Hikeshi crests. These tokens are prized possessions, symbols of aspiration and identity. Quirky detail? Some young fans of the Hikeshi would write letters and poems addressed to the bravest men of the flames, hoping to catch the attention of their idols. These notes were often tucked into coat linings or secret pockets, carried with pride and read in quiet moments. You follow one particularly enthusiastic boy as he weaves through the crowd toward a group of hikers returning from duty. His eyes sparkle when he spots Genzaimon, and he rushes forward to ask for an autograph, a rare honor in this time and place. Genzaimon obliges, signing the boy's wooden fire hook with a brush dipped in ink. The boy beams, clutching his treasure as if it were forged from gold. It strikes you how the Hikeshi's celebrity status wasn't just a matter of bravery, but carefully cultivated. They appeared at festivals, posed for woodblock prints, and sometimes even performed staged rescues for crowds. Their flamboyant coats, tattoos, and rituals weren't just for function, they were part of a public image, a brand centuries ahead of its time. Historians debate how much of this was genuine admiration and how much a necessity to maintain morale and order in a city constantly on the edge of disaster. As the sun sets, the children disperse, their dreams carrying the Hikeshi legacy forward into the next generation. You realize that in Edo, the firefighters weren't just battling flames, they were building myths. And those myths, they burn brighter than any fire. Section 14. As dusk settles, you find yourself drawn toward the theater district, a place where the flicker of lanterns mingles with the soft strains of shamisen and the murmur of eager audiences. It's here, beneath painted wooden eaves and fluttering silk curtains, that the worlds of Hikeshi and Kabuki unexpectedly collide. You step inside a fireproofed Kabuki theater, a wooden palace wrapped in thick layers of clay and plaster, designed specifically to resist the city's ever-present threat of fire. The air inside is cool and scented with incense, a calm sanctuary amid the chaos outside. The connection between firefighters and actors runs deeper than shared danger. Both performed for the public, both crafted identities as larger-than-life figures, and both relied on elaborate costumes and symbols to command attention. You watch as actors prepare backstage, their makeup bold, their movements precise. Across the room, several hisheshi sit quietly, their coats draped carefully over benches, tattoos glimpsed beneath open shirts. There's a mutual respect here, a knowing nod exchanged between men who understand performance in its many forms. Quirky detail. Some Hikeshi were rumored to have moonlighted as kabuki actors, swapping coats for kimono to strut the stage. Likewise, kabuki actors would sometimes adopt Hikeshi motifs, dragons, flames, fierce crests, in their costumes, borrowing the firefighters' bravado to electrify their roles. Historians still debate how much influence each had on the other. Did the Hikeshi inspire the Kabuki's fiery heroes, or did the theater shape the firefighters' flamboyant image? Probably a bit of both. In one corner, an actor practices a fire rescue scene, brandishing a wooden pole and spinning a soaked coat as if it were a cape. Nearby, a firefighter laughs quietly, the sound low and warm. It's a dance, a shared ritual, a testament to how deeply fire, and the fight against it, was woven into Edo's cultural fabric. You catch a glimpse of an intricately embroidered coat hanging near the stage, its flames painted in gold thread, shimmering under lantern light. It looks less like gear and more like art. As the curtain rises, the audience's anticipation crackles in the air. You settle in, the echoes of hoses and clappers replaced by the rhythm of drums and voices raised in song. The stories told here, of honor, struggle, and redemption, mirror those lived daily by the Hikeshi outside. For a moment, you forget the fire still waits beyond these walls. Here, the flames are tamed by story and song. And in Edo, sometimes, that was enough. Section 15. The winds of change begin to stir. You notice it first in the subtle shifts, the newer uniforms lacking the elaborate embroidery, the simplified rituals, the quieter parades. The flamboyance that once marked Edo's Hikeshi starts to dim like a lantern flickering in the rain. A new shogunate official has arrived with orders. Streamline the firefighting brigades, reduce unnecessary display, and enforce stricter discipline. The grand coats, once soaked and swung like banners, are now practical only in function, not fashion. Tattoos are frowned upon, seen as unruly marks from a less civilized time. Genzaemon grumbles as he folds away a coat embroidered with a fierce dragon. "They want us clean, quiet, and invisible," he says, voice low, like ghosts. The Hikeshi are being reshaped, transformed from neighborhood legends into bureaucratic cogs, their tools standardized, their movements regulated. The firehouses become more like offices, less like stages. You watch as a younger brigade member tries on a new uniform, plain, dark, without the intricate crests that once defined him. He looks lost, like a samurai stripped of his katana. Quirky fact, some older firefighters secretly embroidered their coats under the new regulations, hidden beneath linings or inside collars. A quiet rebellion stitched in silk and sweat. Historians still debate whether these reforms improved safety or erased a vital part of Edo's spirit. The showmanship may have been a distraction, but it was also a source of pride, identity, and morale. The streets grow quieter without the matoi waving overhead, without the clack of polished geta announcing the arrival of heroes. The firefighters become faceless, efficient, but less visible. You feel the loss keenly. It's not just the coats or tattoos. It's the soul of the Hikeshi, fading like smoke into the night. One evening, as you walk past the now silent fire tower, you spot an old coat draped over a railing. Forgotten. Its colors are muted, its threads worn. You reach out, fingers trembling, and brush away the dust. The city moves on, but the legend lingers. Because even as the flames die down, the stories, they burn on. Section 16. The sun has long set on the era of flamboyant Hikeshi, but you find yourself drawn to an old warehouse on the city's edge. Its sliding doors creak open with a groan that echoes through the empty space. Dust motes dance in the single beam of moonlight filtering through a cracked skylight. And there, folded carefully on a worn wooden crate, rests a coat. It's a Hikeshi's coat, unmistakable despite the years. The fabric is faded, the once vibrant embroidery dulled by time and neglect. Yet even now, you can see the flames stitched in golden thread, curling and licking as if alive. The inner lining still holds a story. Dragons coiled, waves crashing, gods watching silently from the shadows. You lift the coat. It's heavier than you expected, still soaked in memories, still weighted by the bravery of those who wore it. The scent of camphor and smoke lingers faintly, a whisper of a city that burned and rebuilt again and again. This coat isn't just fabric and thread. It's a ghost, an echo of a time when firefighting was part dance, part devotion, and all heart. The stories stitched inside remind you of men who climbed burning rooftops with no armor but pride, who bore their scars beneath tattoos, who carried the hopes of a city on their backs. You fold the coat gently, reverently. The weight settles in your hands like a promise. Outside, the city hums quietly beneath the stars. Wooden houses asleep, lanterns dimmed, the distant clack of geta fading into the night. Edo may have changed. Its fires may have grown smaller, its heroes quieter. But the spirit of those firefighters, their courage, their style, their fierce flaming hearts, remains. You wrap the coat around your shoulders, feeling its warmth seep into your skin, and as you stand there in the stillness, you know one thing for sure. Some legends don't fade, they smolder. Now, dim your lights, settle in, and let these echoes of flame and courage lull you into peaceful rest. The weight of history softens, the smoke fades, and you're left with warmth, the kind that stays long after the fire dies down. Thank you for traveling this smoky path with me tonight. Until next time, sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.